So this is the final aspect of Volume 3, which is the last book of the series for the adventures of Susan MeeLing, Scuba Diver Extraordinaire, chapters 10 through 20, Volume 3, written by me, Reverend Susan MeeLing, Reverend MeeLing, Lady Dori, Belle, various different. So, in reference to the portions of the final chapter, in reference to the scuba diving aspects, while there's quite a bit that I have written in that final chapter, I'm essentially just going to point out the fact that though I look the way I do, meaning the haircut, as well as the hair color, the tattoos, as well as the head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, after effects from the subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe, temporal area of my brain. It took several years to dissipate, but the after effects of the headaches and migraines, as well as the cognitive issues and memory deficits, and having gone from college algebra with trigonometry and calculus to second grade math. Despite the way I look and obviously the tattoos as well, there was not a single aspect of scuba diving in reference to not just the training I went through, the classes, even during the fun dives, which realistically were what other people called it. For me, because of making sure that I was able to complete a safe descent, safe scuba dive, and safe ascent each time, no matter where I went, including to the oceanic areas where Cozumel is, as well as the oceanic areas off of the coast of Boca Raton, and then the oceanic areas where the Vandenberg is. And of course, with the cavern diving. Now, the cavern diving certification, realistically, my choice to go through that particular course had been to properly educate myself in regards to the gear for cavern. After having gone through the Peacock Springs area, I understood and comprehended for myself that while it was gorgeous to be able to go into the cavern areas, and the training was immeasurably valuable, the aspects for myself had been for the gear as well as for the training. It was none of my training that I went through or put myself through had been to one-up another scuba diver or even to impress anybody. To be realistic, scuba diving, all of the training was genuinely to assist myself because of the headaches and migraines. I thought, and it did genuinely help me in a lot of ways, not just in the pain levels, but the educational aspects as well. However, while apparently my neighbors in 736 are having a little bit of a fit with their cabinets. It was not to do anything other than for myself. And albeit being selfish in certain regards, in the aspects of the training portions of the classes for the headaches and migraines. I also was able to teach my son and my daughter to genuinely study, genuinely do what was necessary to understand as much as possible, as well as taking education seriously. And not just in me telling them that, but actually showing them that. And after the cavern scuba diving training, and again, I didn't need to take the course itself in order to learn the gear by technicalities. It was for ensuring the understanding and comprehension as best as possible. One of the portions in regards to, despite how I look, as I've been told multiple times, despite looking the way I do, it was an extremely important aspect to know my own limitations. And in such, I knew my limitations when it came to the ice diving class as well as the trimix class. I pulled myself out of those. Not because I was afraid to fail. On a daily basis, I deal with that in different ways. However, it was for, again, in aspects of the safety. And so, in regards to after the cavern certification, the course itself, and especially after the polar bear dive, I made the choice to, not just because also what was going on with my daughter, because of McCoy Elementary School and what occurred in that regard. And that was obviously before the issues at the Fort Worth Zoo field trip. But I could feel certain aspects in regards to my own health that I could not put any divers at risk in regards to where I was. So even though Clear Springs Scuba Park is at a set depth and by technicalities not that deep in comparison in certain areas. I mean, at least at Clear Springs it's not that deep. In other areas that's a whole other ball of wax. But in the areas, I did not want any of the divers, whether they were out at the lake or even if they were just helping on land, they would not be able to explain all of the different aspects for if there was anything that occurred medically to the medical professionals, the emergency medical services that would have inevitably had shown up. And so to prevent those scuba divers from attempting to explain stuff to the emergency medical services of the different physical stuff that hypothetically could have occurred if I had continued instead of pulling myself back and knowing my limitations, I did not want any scuba diver, whether they actually had been a teacher of mine or instructor of mine, or someone that was out there on a fun dive or instructional dives, to have to see that or attempt to explain that and not be able to, and then essentially, in certain regards, be riddled with guilt because of the natural human response to something like that. And so I didn't have to. I know that I would have, for the most part, have been okay. But I was not willing to take that risk. Scuba diving is risky enough as it is. And even in a lake, even in a quarry, even in a hot spring, there is various risks that can occur. And, you know, obviously out in the ocean, there are plenty of other risks. And so in order to ensure not just my own safety, but what was best for my son and my daughter as best as I could, as well as all of the other scuba divers, I did not want to be a bad example. I only wanted to make sure that, you know, not only did none of them have to deal with that, but they also wouldn't have to worry, I guess in some regards, about having to explain that to medical professionals. Because how could they? Nobody has landed as deep as I was and surfaced alive. Nobody has, and without any medical, I mean, literally landing next to the Vandenberg at the bottom of that part of the ocean, and then because of that much larger fish, you know, fishy with the teeth, essentially pulling me deeper, essentially, than the actual Vandenberg because of that particular vicinity, in not just the Bermuda Triangle, but the Mathias Abyss. With so few who had believed me at the time, I wasn't willing to put them through that. I thought that was more responsible in certain regards to pull myself back. Since what occurred in regards to me being targeted and my son and I winding up in Washington State wrongly, prophecy, yes, but still it was wrong nonetheless for that to occur. I had to do what I could, as best as I possibly could, to ensure what I could for the best outcome. And despite it not necessarily being the most normal, what about me is, realistically. So, I had put myself through various things to ensure I understood scuba diving. And yes, I was able to do certain things and map out certain aspects. And it gave me a better understanding for a dream that I had many, many years ago in reference to that underwater travel system being able to be done. But I guess in certain ways, I do have to say that if I didn't land where I did, I definitely wouldn't have seen those shinies that are in that vicinity, because those Gemstones that have been mined out of the earth are stunning. There are plenty that are stunning. And then there are the ones that have been at the bottom of the ocean in certain locations that have had that additional compression to what already had compressed. Because obviously they were mined out of the earth first, and then, you know, they were put on ships throughout historical times and blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, whatever happened, and they landed at the bottom of the ocean. I was able to see some very... I didn't take pictures. I admit that. I took pictures of the area, of course, but underwater it is very pretty. And those gemstones are very, very, very pretty. However, what they would look like on land out of the ocean. I revert to that aspect with the male that I had been engaged to and that female that he had dated prior who, oh, my James earrings. No. No. Just as a jeweler's daughter, I know I'm about to sound snobby, does not change the fact those earrings that she tried guilting Sean over were not stamped. So, no. And then, compared to what I saw, there was one that I was shown, and I'll get ready to end the video on this. There was one piece that I was shown, and it was at the top of the wooden chest with, I think it was brass side, like the hinges on each side, and then bolts that were, the bolts were about that big. So, you know, for each one. And the chest was taller than I am. And they removed the thing for me to see. And I took a look, and there was this, I'm going to guesstimate it was a necklace. And the individual pieces that, you know, went together, the stones were like that. And to go around the neck, and then there was this piece that, you know, on me it would be like down here. Ooh, and the gemstones that's right. I mean, you know, there is a term in certain locations, but especially where I grew up going to as a child in New Jersey, called a roughneck, and that would be a bedazzled roughneck for those gems that and in the water I could see the swirls from the compression and the additional mineral deposits and everything like that. Those who are gemologists very much understand, and archaeologists, I'm sure as well, very much understand and comprehend in better words than I got. But ooh, each one of those individual pieces that went around, each one was different, even though they were all the same gemstone. And then, you know, it was an emerald cut, and then smaller pieces, though not by much, than the pieces that were along the side. Oh, oh. very pretty, so shiny, so pretty, and really, 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 I wanted to take it up with me, but there were so many others that were underneath where that one necklace was, and I was just like, which one do I choose? Because I want them all. And then trying to bring it to the surface, that I didn't know what I was going to have to deal with, and I was still upset about that scuba diver that I was assigned to aspect. So, but yeah, yeah, those earrings that Leslie claimed. Comparatively, nothing on that at all whatsoever, and not just compared to what I was raised within with the house that I was growing up in. I mean, already those earrings that she threw a temper tantrum over to Sean were just, okay, so I've held flawless diamonds in my hands, and flawless emeralds in my hand, and flawless rubies in my hand, each one. And then, a few others, and I've held, Rolexes from the, 1800s or late 1800s, early 1900s in my hands. I've held Bulova watches in my hands, as well as Bulova clocks. But your James Avery earrings, yeah, no. And then, of course, by the time I was engaged to Sean, it was kind of like, how do I put into words other than, because I couldn't explain at that time how I had seen certain things. Although he did know, I told him that I landed at the bottom of the ocean. I did. I told him back then. Actually, before we were dating. Well, before we were engaged, of course, but yes. He knew, and ironically, I think it was shortly after I told him that about that Vandenberg dive, that would be when he was like, oh, I'm going to join the army. Anyway. So, point being, I've had a few adventures, I guess. I've done a few things. So, if there's company that's interested, and I guess after this quarantine aspect is, taken care of and over, I have some ideas and I know where to go. And just saying, I've and they're not the only. There's quite a few, and so just saying, there are some pretties in the bottom of the ocean that I just. But yeah, so. But yes, the safety aspect obviously was extremely important, and making sure that there weren't any problems for the other scuba divers. So that is the conclusion of the 3-part book series of The Adventures of Susan MeeLing, Scuba Diver Extraordinaire, written by me, Susan MeeLing. And yeah, that's pretty much, I guess, it. So, I could put comments and stuff like that, and sure that those companies that do that sort of stuff. I do not camo. Except for in scuba gear by technicalities. Or when it's really, really cold. When it's really, really cold, then I technically camo, because I have a jacket with a hood over my head, or a few, and then gloves and multiple jackets, and then covered, and you can't see this hair, and you can't see the tattoos. So, you guys have a good one. And like and share and subscribe, and have a good one. I'll be making a few other videos in, quarantine time, right?